Hey, I'm Abby and welcome back to the Life Work Balance YouTube channel. Today I want to talk to you about 10 different types of stories that you can prepare to help you answer almost every behavior-based or situational question that could be thrown at you during the interview process. Before we jump into those 10 examples, please go ahead and give this video a thumbs up if you're looking forward to learning those examples. And if you haven't already, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button as well as the bell so that you can continue to receive life work balance advice delivered directly to you every week. To effectively tackle any type of behavior-based interview question or situational-based interview question, having some of these different core stories prepared will really help you demonstrate these key competencies that employers are looking for in their future employees and their new hires. These stories demonstrate a wide variety of experiences that will help you communicate why you are a good fit for the organization. So let's jump into each of these 10 different types of stories that you could tell. And while I'm talking about these different types of stories, think to yourself about different stories that you've experienced that could fit into these different types of themes. As you're thinking about these stories, you'll want to remember to tell your stories in the very common CAR or STAR format. Now, CAR and STAR are essentially the same. I have several videos on the topic of CAR and STAR. I've linked them in the description box below, but they are essentially ways that will help you structure your story so that you can convey that you have these qualities in an effective way during the interview process. So if you're needing help figuring out how to actually structure your stories to answer these types of behavior or situation questions, please check out my additional videos that I've linked to in the description box below. So let's jump into it. 10 different types of stories that you can prepare for yourself to then be prepared to answer almost any behavior or situation question that could come up during an interview. The very first is an achievement story. An achievement story is where you spend some time sharing how you have achieved something significant. This could be meeting or exceeding goals, completing a project successfully, or even receiving recognition or an award. Sharing an achievement-based story will show that you are achievement-oriented, results-driven, you have perseverance, and that you can engage in goal setting. Some example questions that could come up where you might be able to share an achievement story would be, tell me about a time when you went above and beyond to achieve a goal. Or, what is your greatest professional achievement? The second type of story that you can prepare is a challenge story. This is where you detail a time that you faced a significant challenge or obstacle and overcame it. This could include conflict resolution, dealing with tight deadlines, or navigating a difficult project. This type of challenge story that shows how you overcame a challenge or an obstacle demonstrates the competencies like problem solving, adaptability, resilience, and critical thinking. Questions that could come up during an interview that would prompt you to share your challenge story include, describe a challenging situation you encountered and how you handled it. Or, tell me about a time when you had to overcome a significant obstacle. The third type of story that you should prepare for an interview would be a teamwork or collaboration story. This is where you provide an example of where you worked effectively with a team. This could include leading a team, contributing to a team, or collaborating across departments. This type of story will demonstrate teamwork, collaboration, leadership, interpersonal skills, and communication skills. Some examples of questions that could prompt you to tell this type of story would be, give an example of a time where you worked well on a team. Or, tell me about a time when you had to collaborate with others to achieve a goal. The fourth type of story that you can tell is a failure or a recovery story. This is where you share an experience where you experienced a failure or things didn't go as planned and you had to recover from those failures or changes of plans. When you're answering this type of question with a story, you want to focus on what you learned and what you did to improve. The competencies that you would demonstrate as a result of sharing this type of story include accountability, learning from your mistakes, resilience, and that you have a growth mindset. Questions that come up that could prompt you to answer with this type of story include, describe a time when you failed at something and how you dealt with it. Or, tell me about a mistake that you made and what you learned from it. The fifth type of story that you can share is a leadership story. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to have been in a formal leadership position to share a leadership story. You could share a leadership story that includes a time where you were mentoring someone, where you led a project, something like that. So it's formal or informal leadership. The competencies that are demonstrated with this type of story would include leadership, initiative, decision-making, mentoring, and influence. The types of questions that could come up in an interview that might prompt you to share a leadership story would include, can you give me an example of a time when you led a team? Or, tell me about a time when you took initiative to lead a project. The sixth type of story that you could share would be an innovation or creativity story. This is a story where you maybe introduced a new idea, improved a process, or solved a problem creatively. While you share this story, make sure that you highlight the impact that you had on the team, the organization, the project, the product, etc. The competencies that you would demonstrate when you share this type of story include creativity, innovation, problem solving, and strategic thinking. Some examples of questions that would cause you to respond with an innovation or creativity response or story would be, describe a time when you came up with a creative solution to a problem. Or, tell me about an innovative idea you implemented. The seventh type of story that you could tell during the interview process would be a customer service story. This is a story where you describe how you went above and beyond to meet a customer's needs or expectations, or solve one of their problems. This type of story is particularly important for any role that would require customer interaction. Most roles involve customer interaction because your customer could be an external customer, someone who is purchasing your product or service, or an internal customer, someone that you're working with that you're providing some sort of service to. So for example, if you work in IT for an organization, your customers might be other employees in the organization. If you work in human resources, your customers might be the employees of the organization. The competencies that you would demonstrate by sharing this type of story include being customer or client focused, having empathy, problem solving, communication, and service orientation. The types of questions that could come up during an interview that would prompt you to share this type of story would include, can you describe a time when you dealt with a difficult customer? Or, tell me about a time when you provided excellent customer service. The eighth type of story that you could tell during the interview process that is an important one to prepare would be a learning and development story. This is where you share a situation where you learned something new or developed a new skill. You want to make sure that you describe how you apply it to your work, and this could also include how you are engaged in ongoing personal and professional development efforts. Your answer to this type of question could demonstrate the following competencies: lifelong learning, adaptability, self-improvement, proactive development, growth mindset, etc. Some examples of questions that could come up in the interview process that might prompt you to answer with a learning and development story include, describe a time where you had to learn something new quickly. Or, tell me about a professional development experience that has significantly impacted your career. The ninth type of story that you could tell during the interview process would be a conflict resolution story. This is where you tell a story about how you managed a conflict successfully. And this could be a conflict between you and someone else, whether it's a colleague, a supervisor, or one of your stakeholders like a customer, a vendor, etc. Or maybe you helped manage conflict between other people and maybe you helped mediate it or resolve it. The focus here is on resolving the conflict. Highlight the steps that you took to mediate and resolve the issue. The competencies that you would demonstrate by sharing this sort of story include conflict resolution, emotional intelligence, diplomacy, negotiation, and interpersonal skills. The types of questions that could come up that would prompt you to answer with this type of story include, tell me about a time when you had to resolve a conflict at work. Or, describe a situation where you had to mediate between two team members. The 10th and final story that you can prepare to answer during an interview would be a time management story. With this type of story, you would share an experience where you had to manage multiple projects or competing priorities under tight deadlines. Discuss how you prioritized, organized, and executed each of those tasks. The competencies that you would display by answering with this type of story include time management, organization, prioritization, productivity, and effectiveness. The types of questions that could come up during an interview that would prompt you to respond with this type of story include, can you describe a time when you had to manage multiple projects simultaneously? Or, tell me about a time when you successfully met a tight deadline. So those are the 10 different examples of types of stories that you can prepare to answer during an interview. And when you have these 10 different types of stories prepared, you can likely tweak each of these stories to successfully and effectively answer almost every type of behavior or situation-based question that the interviewer can throw at you.